What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Footy with an Edge. Rasmus Hojlund has just been given the "Here we go" by Fabrizio Romano to join Manchester United from Atalanta for 70 million euros. And there have been some mixed opinions online about this transfer so far. Generally speaking, I think United fans are super excited about Hojlund and his attributes, but there have been some questions about paying that much for a 20-year-old striker with less than 2 seasons of senior football under his belt. So the question is, why exactly did Erik Ten Hag decide to pay over the odds to get Hojlund over the line instead of going for an alternative target? In this video, we're going to try to answer this very question by discussing 3 key topics. The first is Rasmus Hojlund's playstyle and statistics playing at Atalanta. Then we're going to talk about how Erik Ten Hag has used strikers at United. And finally, why he decided it was worth it to spend 70 million euros on the young Danish striker. As always, please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy, and don't forget to turn on all notifications to never miss out on content just like this. So based on the eye test alone, Hojlund looks to be a very fast, agile, and skillful player for someone who is 6'4" tall. Strikers who are that tall generally tend to have poor balance and a poor first touch, but from what I've seen so far, he's much better than other players with a similar profile. And look, the comparisons to Erling Haaland are going to be there because they have a similar profile. But Haaland is hands down or hands up, whichever way you want to look at it, a way better player than Hojlund right now. But I do think, for what it's worth, Hojlund is a little better on the ball in terms of his first touch and dribbling than Haaland is. And that's where the comparisons stop. But in all seriousness, what do his stats say when compared to some of the other strikers that United were looking at this summer? Let's start with the positives. Hojlund had 0.47 non-penalty XG per 90 last season, which is not really amazing, but when you consider that he was taking less than 3 shots per game, with 52% of them being on target, it's actually quite impressive. Rasmus Hojlund was also in the 92nd percentile for take-ons attempted, with 3.68 per 90, and he was also decently good at this with 1.37 successful take-ons per 90. And this kind of reinforces my earlier point about how good his balance and his agility is for a tall player and how good a dribbler he is for how tall he is. But by far, his biggest strength is his ability to make progressive runs off the ball. He receives almost 11 progressive passes per 90, which is in the 99th percentile for all forwards in the top 5 leagues last season. This shows that Hojlund has what it takes to keep making selfless off-the-ball runs throughout the game, and he doesn't really get frustrated playing that isolated number 9 role where you don't necessarily have a lot of touches. He also carries the ball into the penalty area 1.5 times per 90, which puts him in the 93rd percentile for this stat, which again shows you that he can get the ball, turn, take a dribble, and get a shot off. Now, in terms of the negatives, there are obviously many gaps in his game. But these negatives are quite expected because Hojlund is still very young and has a lot of development ahead of him. So let's talk through these negatives by comparing him to Randal Kolo Muani, Dusan Vlahovic, Victor Osimhen, and Harry Kane. As you can see here, he's not the most creative striker because of his low assists and expected assists per 90 compared to someone like Randal Kolo Muani or even Harry Kane from 2 seasons ago. But you could say that he's just as bad as Osimhen or Vlahovic in these categories. He's also not a striker that's going to drop deep into the midfield to hold up the play and spray passes in behind the lines and progress the ball up the pitch like a Harry Kane does. But he's more or less on the same level as Kolo Muani, Osimhen, and Vlahovic in these categories. And one last thing that's relevant is that Kolo Muani actually seems to be better than Hojlund at some of the things that Hojlund is really good at, like taking on defenders and progressing the ball up the pitch. So based on everything we've seen so far, Hojlund fits somewhere in between Victor Osimhen and Randal Kolo Muani in terms of the strikers that United were looking at. He's fast and strong like an Osimhen, but he doesn't really have the same aerial ability or the presence in the box. He's also fast and good with the ball at his feet like Kolo Muani, but he doesn't have the same level of creativity that Kolo Muani does. So now that we have a decent understanding of the type of player that Rasmus Hojlund is, let's take a look at the Atalanta system that he played in last season. Now I'm going to read through Atalanta's league finishes in the Serie A, starting with the 2011-2012 season, and notice if you can see a pattern emerging. Starting with 2011-2012, they finished 12th, then 15th, then 11th, then 17th, then 13th, then 4th, 7th, 3rd for 3 straight seasons, 8th, and 5th last season. Do you see that massive jump from the 15-16 to the 16-17 season and continued success since then? It's all because of this guy, Gianpiero Gasperini. In Gasperini's reign, Atalanta have become the definition of an underdog club because despite of a low transfer budget and mediocre player wages, they've been producing scintillating, free-flowing football for significant portions in the last 7 years. And there's a quote from Gasperini that might get you excited. Defending makes you invincible, but if you want to win, you must attack. And this is exactly why in the 1920 season, Atalanta were top scorers in Serie A with 98 goals. And all this is relevant because we have to view Hojlund through the lens of Gasperini's system to really understand what type of a player we're getting at Manchester United. So, Gasperini generally likes to play a 3 at the back system where he'll start in a 3-4-1-2 that you see here and transition into a 3-5-2 or 5-3-2 depending on whether he's in possession or out of possession. The starting lineups that you see here is actually from Atalanta's impressive 2-0 win against Lazio last season, a team that actually finished 10 points ahead of Atalanta in second place. So Gasperini likes to build up the play from the back with his 3 center backs because he wants to create overloads in the defensive third that can translate into overloads in the midfield and also overloads in the attack. So his goalkeeper is usually encouraged to step out from the back to almost play as a second center back, which pushes the central center back out wide a little bit and both of the left and right center backs into a full back position. This automatically draws out the opposing striker and one or both of the wingers towards either the center backs or the goalkeeper or towards the left or right center backs. At this point, the midfield 4 can move further up the pitch, exploiting their numerical mismatch against Lazio's midfield 3. So now these 4 find it very easy to get past the midfield 3 of Lazio and get the ball into Hojlund, Koopmeiners and Lookman. And now Atalanta can create overloads all across the front line using more technical players like Koopmeiners and Lookman to do the link-up play and allow some of these players to do the 1-2s and move forward, while Hojlund can either pin the 2 center backs back or the center back and the fullback back and exploit these channels to run in behind. In fact, in this exact game against Lazio, Hojlund scored by making a darting run through the middle, while Lookman, who capitalized on a loose ball from Lazio, went down the line and crossed the ball into the 6-yard line, and Hojlund had a simple tap-in. So Gasperini's system very much relies on precise player movements happening at the right time in order to manipulate and generate pockets of space for all of his players all over the pitch. And when this system is executed really well, it leads to chances for forward players like Rasmus Hojlund and Ademola Lookman. In fact, Lookman was their top scorer last year with 13 goals and 6 assists, while Hojlund had 9 goals and 2 assists. So what does Hojlund's playstyle and Gasperini's system tell us overall? When we look through Hojlund's stats, we discovered that his biggest strength is his ability to make off-the-ball runs and get on the end of progressive passes played by his midfielders and wingers. And surprise, surprise, that's exactly what Gasperini's system wants Hojlund to do because it relies on overloads all over the pitch to generate pockets of space in behind the defense that Hojlund can run into. Next, let's take a look at how Erik Ten Hag used number 9s last season so we can try to understand where exactly Hojlund can fit in. When I think of strikers that Ten Hag utilized last season, I can only really think of Martial, Rashford, and Weghorst because it was clear from the start that Ronaldo was not a good fit. If you disagree with that statement, let me know in the comments down below. But Ten Hag's preferred system was the 4-2-3-1 last season, which played as a 3-3-1-3 in possession, and each of the 3 strikers we're talking about here offered something different. Martial was probably Ten Hag's first choice number 9 because he offered the perfect combination of most of the things that Ten Hag was looking for. He was fast, so he could run in behind and run into the channels as needed. He was clever, so the timing and direction of his runs were really good. But most importantly, he could drop deep and help United out of tough situations in midfield and allow the likes of Antony and Rashford to make runs in behind into the space that he vacated. Marcus Rashford was more of a makeshift number 9 that had to play centrally because Martial literally couldn't stay fit for more than 3 games at a time. Now Rashford isn't as clever as Martial, and he didn't have the same quality of hold-up play or creativity, which meant that the inside forwards couldn't thrive as much as they could alongside Martial. But Rashford carried a much higher threat with his pace in behind, so Ten Hag focused on more long balls from deep so that Rashford could run either through the middle or through the channels in order to get the best out of Rashford. And Weghorst was easily the worst of the 3 because despite his high work rate and his willingness to do anything for the team, he was very slow compared to both Rashford and Martial, and he didn't have the touch or creativity that Martial offered. Now, based on what I've described so far, it would seem like all we need is a like-for-like Martial replacement that can just stay fit for the whole season. But in reality, Martial has his limitations too. He doesn't quite have the physicality, aerial presence, or the box presence of a traditional number 9, and he doesn't have the deep-lying playmaking skills that a Harry Kane offers. So what exactly is the right framework to use to identify the perfect Ten Hag striker? Now, based on the analysis so far, Hojlund is a tall, pacey striker who's good at getting on the end of things, but not so good at getting involved in the build-up. And Ten Hag's first choice in Harry Kane is almost a polar opposite to Hojlund, because Kane is great on the ball and is a much better fit with United's selfish wingers who play more like inside forwards. So why exactly did Ten Hag go for Hojlund at 70 million instead of Kane for 100, Muani for 90, or just sticking with what we have? I think the answer to this question has more to do with Erik Ten Hag himself than it does with Rasmus Hojlund. Let me explain. At Ajax, his 2 most successful strikers were Klaas-Jan Huntelaar and Sebastian Haller, both of whom were more traditional strikers that were strong, good in the air, and could hold up the ball. Last season, his 2 most successful strikers were Martial and Rashford, who were both very different players to each other, and none of them were similar to what Ten Hag had at Ajax. So do you guys see a trend emerging here? Instead of identifying a striker that fits his system and going to extreme lengths to buy that striker like a Guardiola does, Ten Hag prefers to adapt his system to what he has available. In fact, this applies to other positions as well. Look at Eriksen playing next to Casemiro last year. Instead of using him as a pure number 8 like we actually might have needed, he played him as a deep-lying playmaker who could start attacks from deep, which would get the best out of his passing abilities. So there is no stereotype for a perfect Ten Hag striker, because a perfect Ten Hag striker depends on how the qualities of the number 9 match with the qualities of the players around him. And it's based on this criteria that Ten Hag identified Kane as the number 1, because his qualities of dropping deep to link up play and play balls in behind fit perfectly with the pacey and selfish inside forwards like Rashford, Antony, and Garnacho. And also based on this criteria, you might say that Hojlund isn't a great fit, but we're forgetting another piece of the puzzle here. And that's the fact that Ten Hag backs himself to improve the players that he has, to mold them into better versions of themselves. And there are countless examples of this throughout his managerial career. Look at Sebastian Haller, who was a failure at West Ham, and just a season later managed to contribute 43 goals for Ajax. Look at Marcus Rashford. We saw him literally walking around at the Etihad against Man City under Ralf Rangnick just 16 months ago, while he had his best season so far under Erik Ten Hag last year. And look at Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He was nowhere to be seen in the first half of last season, to the point where we all thought he was going to be sold, and he's arguably our first choice right back now. I could probably keep going and name 10 other players that have become world-class versions of themselves, like De Ligt, Frankie de Jong, Andre Onana, Luke Shaw, and so on. But I think you guys get the point. Ten Hag sees enough physical talents in Hojlund that make him very unique because, like I said, it's hard to find that kind of agility, balance, explosiveness, and speed at that height. But he also sees a young and hungry striker that can be molded into something much bigger and better at a club like Manchester United. Sure, do I think a more developed player like Kolo Muani could have been a better fit right now? But Ten Hag knows that we don't have 90 to 100 million to go get him from Eintracht Frankfurt. And I also think maybe Kane would have been a better fit for right here, right now. But again, we don't have 100 million or more to pay for a much older player like Harry Kane. With Rasmus Hojlund, Ten Hag is getting a striker who is right at the start of his development curve, which will definitely come with some frustrations because he will definitely misplace passes, miss open chances, and be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But given the right attitude and some patience from the United fans, he has the talent to be world class. And if anyone can make this happen, it's Erik Ten Hag. What do you guys think? Do you agree with my analysis of why Ten Hag chose to sign Rasmus Hojlund at Manchester United for 70 million euros? Let me know in the comments down below. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.